Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, and perhaps even good evening. Thank you so much for dropping by and joining me for another exciting Daz Pro Artist stream here on YouTube today. I'm glad you could all make it. We've had so many issues with Vimeo that we decided, hey, let's do the live streams on YouTube instead, because we're kind of used to the interface. There's superior features that we have here, and we're just going to make the archive available on Vimeo to watch later. So I'll turn this into a private link later, but you can watch a recording of this on Vimeo. And just in case you didn't get the email, you didn't get the notification, I've started making a thread in the Daz Plus forum in which I compile a list of all the links until we have a proper watch page in place on the Daz 3D website. So that is, that is that. Thank you so much for being here. Jeff is here. X201 is here. Dan is here. Matt, my God, it's so early for you. I'm glad you could make it. X201 Swords for Two, and Miss Julia is here, one of my moderators. Brian, aka Zero Calvin, is here, and Mr. Dragonate is here, and anyone else who's out there watching, thank you so much for making it. Today it's all about flying by the seat of our pants with VDBs. The VDBs are a new feature that are now available inside Daz Studio 4.20. Also available, are kind of known under the guise of Volumetric. So anything and everything Volumetrics, VDBs are part of it. And I think many of us are a bit sketchy of what they actually are. So I thought I'll take some time and explain what they are, how we can use them in Daz Studio, and then go all the way through how we can create our own with a magical software called EmberGen. There are many other ways to make that happen, but EmberGen is one that I've found recently, and it's actually very useful. It's very interesting. It's a real-time visual effects software, and it can create VDB sequences. So it's made for rendering effects inside its own software, but it can also then export the effects that it creates as VDBs, and we can then bring them use them in Daz Studio. Patrick, really, EmberGen is magic. Yes, I totally agree. And they're very much at the beginning of that journey, and I thought I'll give you a little peek of what that's all about. So before we get there, I thought we'll go and let's go and have a quick look at a couple of things that I've made with EmberGen and what it looks like. This is all done with EmberGen. I think this is actually one of their preview files that you can download for free and then mess with it. But this is brought in and rendered inside Daz Studio as an animation. So very, very cool. Very, very cool. I can't stop making these things. You watch these and you think, whoa, that's very cool. Let's go on. It's $200 a year, X201. That's what EmberGen currently costs, or or $20 a month. That is also possible. Here's another one, Gasoline. That is, perfect. And these are just GIFs, so the quality is actually a little bit better when you see these as rendered images. But by the end of this, we're going to have made something like that ourselves, literally from scratch, and rendered in Daz Studio. So very, very cool. I'll explain all that. But before we get there, I thought, just so that we're all on the same page here, let's take a look at the volumetric features that we currently have in Daz Studio 4.20 and the things that we can make with it. So I believe this is one that I've made for the previous thumbnail there, in a video in which I'm explaining how to do ground fog, and this is the effect that we can make. So it's literally a one-click option in which we can add a bit of haze and atmosphere to outdoor scenes as well as indoor scenes. So this is what it looks like. I don't have a version without the logo, sorry about that. There is another, so this is just a render feature that's on the render settings tab, so I'll show you where to find that. And then the other thing that we have is, of course, currently the simple volumetric shader. Let me see, this is a clean one I have here. Yeah, the simple volumetric shader. So this is what that would look like. So this here, that is a VDB file, so a volumetric thing that is just resting there on the ground, and that creates this cloud like this fog thing. And then this here, that's another VDB volume. This and the rocket is actually part of the To the Moon bundle by Kindred Arts, and it's a Daz original as well. And that's a really good example of how we can use VDB volumes and what we need to do to make them look like this. So there's a couple of drawbacks right now that we need to be aware of, but I'll talk you through it, and I will show you this particular product as well, just a VDB of that product to see, you know, what that's all about. So these are actually two objects. One is the VDB itself, which is the volumetric fog here. But this thing, that is not technically part of the VDB. VDBs as such can display that, but currently Daz Studio can't. So I think it's not exposed in Iray at the moment. But I think as soon as it will be, we will have that option to display these types of fireballs here and these things like black body temperature and emission and all that. That is part of VDBs, of the actual description of VDBs, but Daz Studio, or rather Iray, can't currently render it. So Kindred Arts was very clever. He put an object in here that is emissive and combined that with the VDB. So we'll have a look at how that works. The smoke is nice, isn't it? Yes, absolutely. And it's a fascinating thing, these types of volumes here. Let's start with the simpler option first, namely the volumetric ground fog. Let's just have a look at that. I've loaded a scene here that I've picked up from Predatron. It's called Along the Prom. That's it, Along the Prom. This is just a section of it, so the actual scene is a little bit longer. I haven't loaded his preset yet, but the scene takes a bit of a time to load, so I'll just bring in the, I think, daylight number 1. Let's see daylight 1. That's probably a good lighting setting. So usually that's a much longer promenade here, but I'm just going to use a small section and just frame it up like this and switch it over to Iray, just so that we see what the scene looks like without anything added to it. And then we'll start playing with the ground fog. And I'll also show you the I think it's a volumetric effect. It's called the haze that we also have as a one-click type option here. I think he's actually enabled that in his render setting. So maybe we'll go and see different. There we go. Let's just use this ATP Daylight 2. That's kind of a clear day kind of scene. And this is what it looks like in Iray. Good morning from Brisbane, Casey. Good to see you. Matt is also from Brisbane. Not from Brisbane, from Australia this morning. So it must be very, very early for you. Glad you could join us for a cup of tea. Very nice of you. So this is what this looks like right now. But there's two things that are literally one-click effects that can make our scenes look more interesting out of the box, and that's really cool. You don't need any new products for that. You don't need to spend any money on that. All we need to do is go over to the Render Settings tab and have a look at the Environments tab. So on here, this is just a sun and sky setup here. There's no HDRI in here. This is all provided by the Predaton product. Under Environment here, we have these two options here. There's matte fog, and there's atmospheric ground fog. And those are the two things that are kind of matte fog we already had in Daz Studio, but atmospheric ground fog, that's new as of 4.20. So matte fog, let me just show you what that does. If I enable that, it goes and pops up a little bit of haze all over the picture. So it technically is a volumetric effect. So I think there's a volume added on the kind of a global volume outside our scene. And this is what it looks like. I think the default, if I go and switch this to, is it 10,000? That's the matte fog visibility in meters here. So imagine this is kind of how far you could see without seeing nothing anymore. I think that's what that means. So as if the fog is, not very dense. It's just a tiny bit of haze here. But if we go and change that to something like, 10 meters, then we'll see that we almost see nothing anymore. So this is now just fog. It doesn't look very pretty. So the sweet spot is probably somewhere in the middle, and it'll depend on how far your camera is away from the scene, what the scale of your scene is, and all that. So the default is 10,000, which is just adding a little bit of haze here. You can just about see it on the bottom. If I go and switch that off, we can see the clear scene again, but just about here with the default settings, we'll see something like, a little bit of haze. And we also see a little haze in the distance here. But if I go and turn that down, so maybe from 10,000, maybe I'll say 5,000, then I can see that my scene gets a little bit hazier. And that's just a really nice just very subtle effect, but sometimes that is, you know, I used to do these things in Photoshop, but it's just so much nicer to have that right inside the render settings. Just, you know, if you use it subtly, so 2000 would probably be a little bit, you know, it's almost like everything's hazy now, everything's foggy, but it's very nice. It's a one-click thing that you can add to scenes, and if you have something darker of a scene, or, you know, something lighter, it's just nice. By the seaside just fits right in with this particular thing. The Mike Wall sketch, I don't think I know that. By Smith and Jones, I don't think I know that. A burrito, afternoon. And Yoshi, I'm glad you could make it. Oh, okay, interesting. Could be the monitor integrated into that laptop, who knows? I'm gonna go and switch this off again. Well, actually, I'm gonna switch this back to maybe, yeah, I'll leave it on 5,000. Let's do that. Leave it on 5,000, and I'll switch it off just so that we're back on this, because the even more exciting feature is, of course, the atmospheric ground fog. And that is something that's also a volumetric thing that is added there under the hood, but it now makes fog from the ground. So whereas the matte fog was like all over the whole scene, atmospheric ground fog does it from the bottom. So it's the way the fog is created is just a little bit different. So as soon as I switch it on, we have various options here, and I can see a huge thick line of fog at the bottom here. So that's with the default values. So once again, off, I can see the stones, and on, well, it looks like if there was water, there's a serious amount of fog on the water. But it's good because there's only really two parameters that we need to be aware of aside from the fog color. So this is this here on the ground fog albedo. That's the color of the fog, which is kind of a medium gray. But you can set this to something like, I don't know, if you wanted to put this to orange, then you have orange fog, which, you know, it kind of depends on the scene. But maybe we're having a Mars type scene and there's a serious fog cloud kind of, you know, rising above the ground, who knows. I'm going to leave it on the default color and play with the ground fog decay start and the ground fog density start scale. So decay start is currently set to 0. If I set this to something higher, then the ground will start higher. I don't think I can send it to something lower, but if I set this to 100, then I can see that the fog starts being built up slightly higher here. So again, this was the default. This is kind of here just by the brick wall here, and then maybe set this to 100, and then the brick wall is gone. It'd be actually quite interesting to see. Can we set it to -200, something like that? Oh yeah, we can. We can also set it to a negative value, and then it goes down. So that's kind of nice. I didn't know that. It is a serious chemical leak, isn't it? I totally agree. But if I just stick with the defaults here, or maybe I'll make it -100. Or actually, maybe I'll go stick it with the defaults here. And I'm thinking maybe I want that to be less thick. Then I can change the ground fog density start scale. So instead of using 1, I can use something like 0.1, and then it looks like, well, the fog is still there. It's just thinned out. So if that is 0.1, I was going to say. There we go. I can see that the fog is still as high as it was before, but I can see a bit of the stones here on the bottom, so that's quite nice. So if I wanted to use that in conjunction with the fog decay start, I can now bring my fog higher so that it's just thinned out, but much higher than it was before. So let me try that with 200. Then the fog is higher, and I can just about make out the stones down here. So if I make it even thinner, 0.05, for example, then I get well, maybe 0.02. Then I see the same tendency that I had with the matte fog that was all over the picture, but I only see this in kind of the bottom half of the picture, which is kind of nice. So 0.01 maybe is a good starting value. And then I have something that is just making all the streets go a little bit foggy there, so kind of nice. There is currently no way, or I don't know of a way, to make this less uniform than it is. I've heard a comment from viewers that they said, well, it's nice, but it's also it's just very uniform, so it's not quite as, there's no noise in there. And I don't know if it's possible to put that in. If we, maybe at one point we'll have those features exposed. I don't even know if that's possible in Iray at the moment. But yeah, this is what we can do, and it's kind of nice. You'd probably think, or I mean, I did think. I'll put this to 0.05 just so that it's, whoops, 0.05 so that it's a bit more apparent here. I was thinking maybe it'll be a good idea to combine this together with the matte fog, but I urge caution, because it appears that if I do that, I see something like a line here in the picture. So no matter where I look, I can always see that line now. And it appears that this is the two volumes that are created under the hood kind of fighting with one another. So once you've seen it, you won't be able to unsee it. So it's kind of here. It's a very distinct line. So depending on the framing, it might work for some scenes, but it doesn't for others. That's the one thing I've noticed. So it's difficult to use these two things in conjunction. But maybe your luck is better than mine. Try it out and see what you can do. And those are things that I think they're kind of a very underrated trick. And I just wanted to bring this to your attention, that this is there. And why not try and use it to snag up one of those amazing prizes that we can have up until the end of the month. There's a contest on called the Turn Up the Heat contest. Maybe I'll show you this quickly. It is a render contest sponsored by Daz 3D that will let you snag up a wonderful Cintiq 16-inch, I believe. And the second runner-up gets $500 in cash, which is just so cool. I think it's on the shop page here. Somewhere at the very front here. Turn Up the Heat final week. That's it. The Sci-Fi Volumetric Render Contest. This is it. So take a look at that. You have still time. If you haven't submitted anything, you can pick up a Cintiq. That's for the first prize winner, which is so cool. Thank you, Brian, for the link. That's much appreciated. $500 second prize. Third prize, $250 in Daz Store credit. That's seriously not shabby. And 3 runners-up, so 6 prizes in total, will get $150. Very cool. You can even get a freebie. There are these 2 videos in which I'm explaining more about what we've just recapped here. There's this here, the Get Started with a Bonus freebie. That's like a little sci-fi drone thing here that you can pick up for free. So do so, regardless if you enter the contest or not. And there's some rules as to how you need to post, what you need to post. Good luck to all of you. I hope I'm going to see some of your amazing submissions. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you can do. So that's the render contest. And those are neat tricks that are literally one-click affairs that you can add to your scenes and, keep them in mind for things going forward. Literally one click to turn a regular outdoor scene into something that looks really cool. Sometimes that's literally the difference between a good scene and a great scene. If you make it a little bit less dense on the ground, 0.02 perhaps, that'll be better. 0.01 even. Yeah, so ground fog decay start and ground fog density start scale. Those are the 2 things to watch. Thickness graduation, so like a gradient, you mean? Yes, this is. I think that's automatically in there. So as you thin this out, ground fog density start scale, that is that. You can play with the other parameters, see what you come up with. But yeah, these are the 2 one-click volumetric effects that we have in Daz Studio right now. Let me go and switch this off here. And that off as well. And then I'm going to go and bring in a brand new scene. And we'll talk about the other cool feature that we now have, which is the simple OpenVDB volume shader. Simple OpenVDB volume shader. That's the one. And that is actually a shader that we can apply to an object, to any object. And the object is just an empty container that will then hold the VDB file. So that's maybe before we do that, let's go and just think about what a VDB actually is and why that is cool. And it's like how do these things, we see them on the Daz website. I think on the front page there was one that's actually kind of nice that cycles through some of the bits and pieces there. Was that in shop? I think it was in shop, wasn't it? Yes, here, introducing volumetrics for Daz Studio 4.20. There we go. And there's some little videos here, like these clouds that encroach onto the plane and this twister thing here. These are 2 VDBs that kind of turn around one another. And so what it is literally a standard made by DreamWorks, actually. So it's a standard for sharing these volumetric effects across applications. So it's a way to describe a file so that one app can create these VDB files, these volumetric files with the VDB standard, and another program can then open that and then render them. So that's really what that's all about. And if you think about an OBJ and how that's made, it is literally a text file that describes where each vertex is in the scene. And VDB files, this VDB standard, that is very similar. It doesn't describe points in 3D space, it describes voxels in 3D space. And a voxel, if you don't know what that is, think about it as a three-dimensional pixel. In fact, the easiest way to show you this is actually if you think about a Rubik's Cube. And imagine it's not quite a Rubik's Cube. I mean, if I take this apart, these things will have kind of hooks in the middle so that when I turn these things that the mechanism works. But imagine these would be 3 by 3 by 3 just cubes that I'm holding together, that are magically kind of fused together. The whole outline of the cube would then be the bounding box of my VDB file. And inside it, I can describe each and every square here and give it properties like how dense is it, what's the color of it, what's the temperature of it. So those are the things that can be described by these VDB files. And in this case, I'd have a VDB that's not quite dense. It's only 3 by 3 by 3 voxels in size, so its resolution is limited. But if I had one that has many more, then like in this case it's 5 by 5 by 5, then that would have a higher resolution, even though it might have the same size. So that's how VDBs work. Actually, I've got one that's even larger. This is a 6 by 6 by 6 Rubik's Cube. That's kind of cool, isn't it? So each of these pixels, even on the inside here, would describe how my object looks like. And that's basically the magic behind describing a VDB volume. And this VDB standard is there to make that happen. I've got one more. So I've got 4. So these would all be, imagine they're all the same size, but they all have different resolutions in this case. I hope this kind of makes sense. I hope it does. If not, do feel free to ask, of course. The Alka-Seltzer VDB that I've made yesterday, okay, let me have a look at that. I think that is, have I got it? The Alka-Seltzer one. You might mean, is that this one here, Yoshi? Is that what you mean? How to tell a nerd. How many Rubik's Cubes does one own? Many, many more. These are only the ones that I have in here. I think I've got like 5 or 6 others. I've got like the 2 by 2. I've got various other sizes like dodecahedrons and stuff. This is right now I see why you mean this is an Alka-Seltzer one. This is actually a flying meteor, or it's supposed to be. And yeah, so this is the emitter here. We're following the emitter, and it emits stuff and it's being moved as it does that. That's how that works. Did you try the beta, Yoshi? I'm just reading about your issues that you had there. Did you try the beta version of Daz Studio? That's the one that I frequently have installed next to my release version. And sometimes that just works a little bit better. It's a little bit further ahead. So these, like the Alka-Seltzer one, just to get back to that, I've downloaded that. So you can get these types of VDB files just to play around with it on OpenVDB, openvdb.org. That is the actual project website for the people who make the file format. And they tell you a little bit about it. There's like the About section here that tells you very technically what it all is all about, that there are conversion tools and topological operations, and it's all very scary when you read it, and it's not made for creatives. But there is, under download here, you can have a look at the sample files. So these are all VDB files that you can download from them, and you can play around with it. And I've got a couple, so we can have a look at it. Maybe we can have a look at the bunny, and they're all zip files here. The smoke bunny, and then there's the explosion VDB here. Maybe I'll go download that as well. I don't remember if I have that. Explosion VDB, there it is. So I will have a look at that. But then the other website that you can go to, and we're going to have a look at this. What are they called again? The people that make EmberGen, what are they called again? Junga, there we go. JungaFX.com. So they also have some sample files that you can look at. This is where you download EmberGen. That's the one that we use to create VDBs. Under downloads, you can see free VDB examples, and they have some very, very cool things here that we can have a look at. So these are all animations, but they contain various VDB, so you can pick one from the middle, and then we'll see what they look like. I'm going to use the one that I've just downloaded here, that I've never tried out, so that's always good for a demo, isn't it? Explosion.vdb. Let me go and unzip that. Extract all. Check it out. Replace. Yep, perfect. And there it is. So I don't need the zip file anymore. I now have this explosion.vdb. It's 76 megabytes in size, so it's kind of big. Let's see how we can bring that into Daz Studio. So what we need is a regular primitive, or any object that can take the shader, and the shader then loads this VDB file so that Iray can render it. So I'll go and create myself a new primitive, and I'll just make it a cube 1 meter by 1 meter. Here he is. And this cube will now get a shader on the Surfaces tab. I'll just select the default surface here, head over to Presets, and then in an ideal world, if you've updated your starter essentials, or the default resources rather, you can head over to Shaders, and then here in Iray, you'll find a new category that's called Effect. And in Effect, there's only one thing in here currently, which is the simple OpenVDB MDL volume. Dissecting that MDL volume, that's the shader language that describes Iray. OpenVDB is the thing we've just looked at, the description of how volumes can be shared between applications. And simple means I have a feeling there's one to come which might be advanced. So simple means it's really simple at the moment. So I double click that, and then I see that my cube turns kind of transparent here. And under Editor, if I open that up, I can see that I have one channel that's called volume. There's multiple others, but they're only there to describe this in the viewport. Like here, for example, under viewport, I can set how transparent my cube is, because technically I don't need to see it at all. Ideally, we'd have something like a kind of dummy volume that would just show us the size of the VDB, but we currently don't have that. As I said, it's a simple VDB open MDL, simple shader here. So let's go to volume, and under volume file, I can now go and load in my VDB file that I've just downloaded from OpenVDB. So let me do that under Browse. And under the downloads, I've got Explosion. That's the one. Hit open. And then I see nothing, which is disappointing, isn't it? But it's because this is an Iray shader. I can't actually look at this in Filament or in the texture shaded view. So I'm going to have to go and switch this over to Iray. And then maybe we can see something. He says maybe, because I don't really see anything just yet. So there's several reasons for that. One might be my lighting. I'm using my default HDRI, which might be a little strong, I don't know. But the other one is the fact that it's probably very thin and very slim. So there's one thing here under volume, there's the density multiplier, and that's set to 1 by default, which isn't a lot. So if you set this to something higher, you'll be able to make the VDB visible. So let's try 100. And we can see that something is happening. It doesn't look anything like the thing we've just seen on the OpenVDB website, though. That is what that was supposed to look like, the explosion. It doesn't look anything like that, sadly. But that's because we need to jump through one more hoop. So I think the lighting's okay. I think I don't need to change the lighting. But this looks like it's clipping against the size of my cube. And no matter what I do, if I go and make my cube larger, it'll still look like this, but it'll just clip against the larger cube. So I can manipulate my cube, but the volume itself isn't going to look any different. Let me go, whoops, bring this back. So what we need to do is we need to actually rename the surface of our object. So when I create a new object in Daz Studio, a new primitive, its only surface is called default, here this one. And we need to rename that to volume so that the shader understands that this thing might go beyond my node's outline. So there's this option here, clip to geometry. If I switch that to off, then nothing seems to happen at the moment, and that's because the shader doesn't know that this is supposed to be the volume surface. So let's go and rename that with something called the I see. I like it. I like it, X201. So we need to rename that. We do that with something called the Geometry Editor tool. It's a bit of a crazy tool. You can find that under Tools. It's down here, Geometry Editor, or you use this little icon that I've got here, which is the pencil with a grid icon here. Either way, we'll also need the Tool Settings tab. So we're going to go over to that. And in it, I can find the groups that are defined on my object, on any object. This is kind of a handy tool. If you needed to add an additional surface on any of the existing clothing items that you have, you can do that here. Under Surfaces, there's one that's called Default. There's also Default Face Group here, but we don't need to touch that. It's just about the surface here. It only has six sides here. So double click it and call it volume. So this is very important to rename that into volume. And once you do that, we can go switch back over to our universal manipulator tool and then head back over to surfaces, where now it's not called default anymore. It's now called volume. That's good. Under the volume channel in our surface, let's go and untick or disable the clip to geometry option. And then we can see, whoa, that thing's rather large, much larger than it originally looked there. And this is now the voxels that are now no longer confined to my container there. Very cool. I don't know if it's the correct size here. I think it might be. It might still be, it might protrude underneath the virtual ground here. So let me go and put this up a little and see if we can, yeah, there we go. That's nice. Now we can see it in all its glory. And that's really important to understand this mechanism so that we can display the VDB volume in its entirety. And that's kind of neat. So that is now, the cool thing about this, it is a three-dimensional object. So if you look at it from other angles, you will see that it does have a shape. But I've had a question recently, and that was about, can we now go and drape something over it like cloth, or can this be made to collide with something? And I don't think it can at the moment. It is just a volume description. So as far as Daz Studio is concerned, the geometry of this is still the original cube. It's not actually the thing that comes out of the cube. That's just how Iray renders this, but it's not something touchable, tangible as such. True, Casey, true. So yeah, kind of depends on the effect that you want, I suppose. We'll see how we can make our own VDBs in a moment. So if you needed something more specific, like, creeping ground fog or something, that is all doable with something like EmberGen. Blender can also do it, but I haven't worked out how to do it. It's a bit tricky, like many things in Blender. It can do much, but it's also figuring out how to do it is kind of a bit of one of those things that'll take a few lifetimes, I guess. So let me go and make the environment light a little bit darker here. So what you'll notice is that there's no orangey bits in this right now. And that is true because the orangey bits here, same with the fire here, that's described inside the VDB. So those are types of, I suppose, voxel descriptions, you could say, how each voxel needs to look like. And fire is something, and temperature, those are things that can be described inside the VDB. But Daz Studio, or rather Iray, doesn't have a mechanism to associate how these things are supposed to be rendered just yet. So I'm thinking as soon as Iray will expose these things, we'll probably see something like an advanced volumetric shader. But that's pure speculation on my part. So for now, there's really nothing other than the gray cloud that we can render here. So I've shown you in my videos there how you can make use of light sources in here. You could drop a point light in here and then make parts of this thing light up properly. Like if I go and drop a point light in here and just move that up and then fiddle with the settings. Let's hope it's kind of in the middle of this cloud here. I think it is. I think it might be. Oh yeah, make my HDRI a little bit darker, so 0.3 perhaps. And then I'll go and crank up my point light's value a little bit under light photometrics. I'll make that 100,000. And then with luck, we should see it light up we don't have luck right now. What a shame. Let's add a couple of zeros in here, and there we go. Now it kind of comes out. Move this over here, and yeah, I suppose it's a bit too strong here. Maybe 1,000. Maybe we'll add a few more zeros in here. I mean, the other option that you have is to go to the cube or to your volume, and then just drop down the density multiplier to something like 50 instead. So there we go. That makes that light up. So maybe we'll make that 75 instead, or 60. Oops. And then you can do something like that, at least so that it looks a bit more interesting. You put a point light in it, and maybe even go and change the light of the light. So sorry, the color of the light. Instead of something like white, you could try something like kind of a red orangey bit, and then you can kind of make it look like as if it was something that explodes. So that's a cheap possibility to do that. You can also try to make fires like that. So that's certainly a possibility, but we don't have the exact parameters that this VDB technically has at the moment. So as an interim solution, vendors like Kindred Arts have gone ahead and came up with a really cool solution, and combining a VDB with not just a light, but with an object that kind of fits into the VDB or around the VDB that then has an emissive surface. So that's essentially the same idea, just on steroids, if you will, and that looks really convincing. So that is something that you see in the To the Moon bundle. There's this thing, maybe I'll just go and show you this. We don't want to keep this, do we? I've explained this in the previous videos. I just wanted us to all be on the same page here. Let me go and take the point light away and the cube out as well, and find that product here. I think it's under props. There's Jupiter Rocket, and there's the KA Rocket Launch VDB product. So if you search for VDB on the Daz store currently, you see all kinds of products popping up, and that's really good news. So vendors are coming up with products here. This is the KA Rocket Launch VDB product. There is also one that's on the front page, introducing Volumetrics. That's the site. If you go there, scroll further down, this is kind of a collection of VDB products. Here, Signal Yields made one where people kind of exhale smoke, and there's the VDB Cloud collection for Iray, and then there's the VDB Smoke Trails with missiles for Iray, and there's clouds and all that sort of thing. So there's more and more products that contain VDBs that are coming out now, and those usually have more than just the VDB in it. And just to show you how they work and get really convincing effects, let me have a look at the KA Rocket Launch VDB product here. So it comes with a selection of these, a kind of a collection of interesting bits and pieces. So if I look at this one, for example, that looks similar to the VDB that we've downloaded from OpenVDB. If I go and double click that, then you'll see that it's large. Control F, there we go. So this is the cube here that'll contain the VDB, but it also has this mysterious thing at the bottom here, and that is the emissive part of the whole thing. So if I go and switch this over to, so this is actual geometry down here, and this is the container for the VDB file. If you open that up, you can see what that is. This is an empty here, and this is the launch flames, and this is the VDB container. So this is something that we currently don't see. This is something that we currently see the outline of. So let me go and switch that over to Iray and show you the very, very convincing effect. So it almost looks exactly like a VDB that we'd see on the OpenVDB side, like this, namely. Very, very cool. Yeah, my HDR is still a little bit lower here. So that is how Kindred Arts does it. And that is very, very cool. That looks much more convincing. And if you switch either of these things off, so if I go and switch the flames off, then I'm left with pretty much like we've just seen in the VDB that I brought in. And that is pretty much, if you look on the Surfaces tab, that is also how that looks. So we have the volume here, and then inside, so that's the surface description is volume. Then in here we have the volume channel, and that is where we load the VDB. And then we have parameters here, scattering multiplier, absorption multiplier. And then on top of that, we have the actual geometry. That's the one that emits light. And it does something else though, so it's kind of interesting. If I'm now switching off the fog, then I'm expecting to just be left with the orangey glow. But interestingly, if I don't do that, then this looks not at all like the orangey glow. So there's some other kind of magic that's going on there. I have no idea exactly how it works, but yeah, this is how these products in combination then come up with really convincing VDB type effects. Oh, does it, Patrick? All right. Awesome. Fireballs Iray for Daz Studio. Yeah, that's did we just see that here? Fireballs Iray. Is that the one you meant as well? Yes, there we go. Patrick meant the same one. Gotcha. I don't know that product, so interesting. Yeah, so that is how the products work that you can buy from the Daz store. And I'm kind of hoping that we're going to get an advanced VDB shader at one point that lets us have a look at these properties and adjust them themselves as we get those done. Let's hope that is the case at one point. So the thing that kind of confused me about VDBs is when I first heard about Daz Studio now has volumetrics, I thought, well, can we create volumes like we can in Blender? But that's really not how it works. You can bring in VDB files and then render them inside Iray, but you can't create them yourself. Ah, that's the one, is it? I'm going to have a look at that as well. Thank you, Brian. Good stuff. Thank you guys for bringing this up. This is always nice to learn from one another. Oh, yes. I see. Very nice. Yes, check it out. That is very nice. It's also currently on sale, it appears. There's a big March Madness catch-up sale going on right now. So I see this product for $9.16. Very nice. I don't know how he does it though. I don't know if those are VDB files. They look like they're just that looks like it's not done with VDBs. So it's not; those are not volumes as such. Interestingly. But let's have a look at how we can create our own VDBs, and then more importantly, how we could animate something like that. So that's another just a piece of mystery that I didn't even know existed, but you know, it is possible to do that. So let me go switch this back to filament, and I'll go and delete this. In fact, delete everything. In fact, create myself a new scene here. And in fact, let's go over and have a look at EmberGen, because that's one of the programs that can create VDBs. And it looks a little difficult. So you get that from here, from djangafx.com. And under downloads, you can have the EmberGen real-time fluid simulations. That's the one that we need. 14-day trial version. Fill it out, and then a download will start that you can use for 2 weeks. If you're interested in buying it, you can go and have a look at view pricing, and it'll tell you that it's available as a Djanga FX suite that comes with 2 programs, which includes EmberGen and their other application, which is called Vector Ray Gen. It also is available standalone Vector Ray Gen, and this is EmberGen. This is the one that makes VDBs. It's either $199 for a year, so it's a subscription no matter what. It'll be like a year access. It gives you a perpetual license though, but they will rebill you again at, I think, $149 if you don't cancel the subscription beforehand. Or if you switch this over to monthly here, then you get it for $20 a month. You can try it out for a month or 2. This is if you're an indie or hobbyist with the revenue up to $1 million a year. You can also subscribe to higher tiers if you are a studio. So it's kind of nice. I bought the annual one here, and I'm finding it quite fascinating, I've got to say. It looks super scary when you open it the first time, but hey, don't they always? So it's one of those things. You'll very, very quickly get used to it. I think I might make some videos on how to do this. It looks more complicated and scary than it really is. And this is true for R3DS Wrap as well. When I saw that for the first time, I was thinking, I don't know what to do. And it's not that bad at all. So it's very cool. Let me give you the guided tour. On the left-hand side here, we have the viewport. With Alt left click and drag, you can wander around it. And by default, so mouse wheel scroll zooms in. And I think Alt and middle click just moves it around a bit like in a Blender. Alt middle click, and then you just pan. Alt left click, you move around here, and then mouse button just scrolls in and out. It also tells you this at the bottom here. No matter which window you hover over, if I hover over the viewport here, bottom, it shows you how this, how you're supposed to navigate the viewport. So that's kind of nice. It comes up with this kind of configuration because this is the default emitter, I suppose, the default kind of project. So you need both an emitter and simulation properties, and you need some kind of a surface from which all these things are created. If either of these are missing, then you won't see anything. And likewise, you need a lot of other nodes that make this display in the viewport as it does right now. So much like in our 3ds wrap, we have the viewport here, and we have the node graph up here, and then each node that I'm selecting has different options that show up here on the bottom. And the cool thing is most of these nodes aren't actually all that difficult. It's a little bit like you're used to it from Unreal Engine, perhaps. I can left click and drag around a bunch of nodes, and then lift click and drag, just move them away. And I'm doing this deliberately with these nodes because those are the ones we're not really interested in, which is kind of nice. These are all related. So left click and drag just around it, and then press C for comment, much like in Unreal Engine. And I'm just going to call this whole group here render or rendering. So all these nodes are really only there to give us a visual representation of this thing in the viewport. So it contains things like light and directional light and the skybox. I can, these little icons here let me switch these things off. So if I go and click this to off, then any of these things are being removed. So like the ground, if I don't want to see the ground, so I can do that. That's kind of neat. But these are really only there to show this thing up so that we have something in the viewport to look at. Whereas the ones in the front here, those are only 4 nodes, and they're not actually that difficult to understand. And this is what we can use to maybe later. Did I say no? Did I say no? No, don't do that. Don't do that now. Don't do that. I'm in the middle of a presentation here. There. Sorry about that. So yeah, these are not actually that difficult to understand. We've got the shape, which is the donut here. If I switch that off, everything stops. I've also got a noise node here that I can also disable. So if I look at the way the file is built now, if I don't add noise to it, it's all very linear and there's nothing that's disturbing it. That's just how the emitter works on the volume. If I switch noise on, then there's a bit of variation in there. And if I wanted to make that stronger or less strong or change that in some way, then I can fiddle with the parameters on the bottom here. Much like here with the primitive cylinder here, if I don't want this to be a torus, if I want this to be something else like a box, I can use that, and I can change the size of the box on the bottom here, or I can make it maybe a cylinder or whatnot. So all these things are possible just to change the shape of the emitter and hence the shape of the particles that come out. And likewise with the noise, I can fiddle with those parameters here. We'll look at those in a moment. Then we have the emitter itself, and that's kind of one of the more important factors. It lets me set things like how much, it's difficult to describe. I'd like to say how much fuel is being burnt as an example. So if I crank that parameter up here from fuel rate, if I turn that all the way down to 0, then nothing's being burned, so there's just a bit of smoke that's being emitted. But if I crank the fuel rate up to something, drastic, then I can see that this thing really turns on fire here. Adjusting these values is a bit like adjusting them in Blender. So you can left click them, and that makes kind of a coarser change. But if you go and hold shift while you do that, there's a much smaller change. So you have the option to dial in parameters a bit more accurately that way. Then I can change the smoke emissions. If I wanted more smoke, I can just go dial that up, and that's a lot of more smoke. Or I can make that a little bit less smoke, or I can just turn the smoke completely off, and then that would do that. There shouldn't be any more smoke once this smoke is all dissipated. This happens continuously, so all these things will be created much like a regular particle system. They're created regular, like continuously. But if you go and hit R on your keyboard, then it starts from scratch, and this is where the timeline is, just kind of goes and expands, and this thing's just going away. If you hit R, then you can see that it kind of resets. So if you made a change and you want to see what does this look like when you start from scratch, then this is what happens. R on the keyboard, like Robert. Likewise, space is like a regular animation. You can just go and halt whatever your thing does and just stop it. You can also use that in combination with R. I haven't found a way to step forward yet, so it's not the cursor keys. There's these ones here. I suppose you can do that. You can also keyframe any of these values. So if you have found that you want to move your primitive while it's emitting stuff, then you can do that. So there's animation properties in here as well. But yeah, those are things that you can do on the emitter. There's also, I believe, under activity here, currently we're having a duration or burst of 0.5 seconds, and we have time between bursts is 0. So it happens all the time. There's literally these particles are being generated all the time. But I can also set the time between bursts to something like 1 second, and then I can see that for half a second, every 1 second, something happens with the parameters that I set. So this is how you can simulate something, I don't know, flying. Nothing's happening, then you would do that burst. It happens for 2 seconds and it would stop happening as it maybe impacts, or you could keyframe when something is supposed to explode, then it does the explosion for 3 to 5 seconds and then it stops again. So that's how you do that. And depending on the parameters that you have, this is how you can create these little bursts and little explosions and puffs of smoke and Alka-Seltzer effects and stuff. It does, doesn't it? Arborito, absolutely. It does look very cool. I think maybe we'll use something else, like if I'm going to go and make something like a puff of smoke that would come from a plane, for example. I would go change this from a cylinder to... Actually, I'm going to leave the cylinder, and I'm just going to reduce the size of the cylinder with height. So height, instead of 4 meters, I'm going to make that 0.1, and then it's just a flat disk here. So we have less surface, that's why my effect isn't quite as pronounced right now. But that's cool, I can go and compensate that with parameters on the emitter now. So if I'm happy with that, or maybe I want this to be 1 second long, so it emits something a little bit longer. That might be kind of neat, but it's also not, not as strong as I maybe want it to be. So I can go to maybe emission and have the fuel rate crank up to maybe 100. There's a lot more that's being burned in that 1 second there. And maybe also the smoke rate, I'd like for that to be, a lot more smoke. Sweet, so that's kind of a puff of smoke that we're generating. That's kind of nice. If I want that to be faster, then under activity, I'll just go and turn this down to maybe 0.3. So there's like, something happening for a shorter duration. Or maybe 0.5 was actually a 0.7. That'd be another nice little thing. But it's not quite big enough. Maybe we want this to be even bigger. So I go and create, just add the fuel rate. There's also temperature emission. I could make this thing a lot hotter as it emits stuff. Or just, more fuel. There we go. Now that looks like a boom. That looks like a great explosion. It's almost like now I need more time in between the bursts. So now I have one burst going into the other. So that under activity, I'd say maybe time between bursts, maybe we'll set that to 5. And then we'll have a little bit more time. We'll reset that from the beginning. And that's kind of nice. So that's about 200 frames, 240 frames. Yeah, maybe if I'm thinking that over maybe 160 frames, that would be a good effect. 160 frames, let's remember that, because that could well be our animation as we render it out later and make that happen. Petrol on the barbecue, Jeff, absolutely. Yeah, so 160 frames, I think I like that, Let me go and type that in here, under duration, 160, so that we have this whole duration thing here. I think I like that. So there's something else that we now see as the smoke leaves us to the top here, and that's kind of here. I think I see the outline of my Rubik's Cube, so to say. So I can see that there's basically the volume ends here. The smoke would ideally extend it, but there's just no room in that volume. So I like the effect, but for the bounding box that I have here, for the size, for the resolution of my bounding box, that's just not large enough. So we can change that, and that is not happening under the emitter node, that's happening on the simulation node here. Let's have a look at that. That's actually this thing that we need in a minute, so I'll bring that over here. Volume is the thing that we need. So on the simulation node here, there's these parameters on the bottom here. There's a voxel count. Currently we're on 128 by 128 by 256. So Z is up like in Blender. X and Y are this way, and like width and depth essentially, and Z is up. So we have a square footprint that's twice as tall as it is, as it has the footprint. So we have something technically like a bit like that. That's what our voxel thing currently looks like. And the effect that's happening in here just hits the walls of my bounding box. So I can either make the box larger, so I can leave it 256 high, and I can just also make it 256 wide. That'll make that happen. So 256 by 256. And then it says here at the bottom, apply for the new resolution. I'll do that. And that now means I have a larger voxel resolution as well. So this is now 16 million voxels as opposed to 4 that I had before, or 8, I think. Let's have a look. 128 by 128. What did program say? Program said 4 million. So I haven't doubled it. I've quadrupled the size of my voxels here. 256 by 256. But I've also got a really good resolution going on now. So if I hit apply new resolution and I hit R and press the space bar, then I should see that the smoke isn't hitting the outsides of my wall anymore. I also do see that the effect is now simulated a bit slower, and that's because my GPU has to work a lot harder. So it's one of those things. The other option would be to leave the bounding box that I had before and just make my actual footprint, my actual primitive, smaller. Then I would retain the resolution of the voxels, but it would then, this explosion would happen on a smaller scale, might change the look and feel of it, but it would certainly fit into a smaller bounding box. So we could try that as well. Why don't we? I'll put this back to 128 by 128. Hit apply resolution. And now we're hitting the outsides again. But then if I go to emitter, under transform, I have actually that's the shape, isn't it? There we go. Is it the shape? Radius and height, yeah, radius, there we go. So if I go and put the radius to half of 3 meters, I'll say 0.5 meters. Then it's much smaller, and I think I'm getting the same effect without increasing my voxel resolution. Maybe even 1 meter is probably enough for this. Oh yeah, I'm still hitting the sides here. See what 1 meter has to offer. I think 1 meter we can live with. So we still have the same effect, but in a smaller bounding box. It's still 160 frames. That's going to be okay. That's going to look okay, I think. I don't want to make it too big. You can make it as big as you want, of course, but it'll be an issue then also bringing it across into other applications. It's also a matter of rendering it out. That might take a bit longer and stuff. So we'll just leave it like this for now. And I'll show you one more thing that is also under the simulation here. There's a way to upscale this whole thing. So you can leave it as it is and then upscale to ×2, ×3, and ×4. And once again, this is going to be to the power of, what was it again? To the power of, like more. So it says here, upscaling factor of the simulation. This will increase the simulation, but will keep the shape of the original. Options are ×2, which uses 8 times more memory, or ×3, which uses 27 times memory, or ×4, which means 64 times memory is needed. So if I go and enable that and just set it to ×2, once again, I need to apply that here. then we have a similar thing that we had before. So it has more resolution. The simulation is a bit slower, but I think it'll be good once we get that exported. There's also a ×4. It's probably gonna, I might not do that. That might just go and make it really, really slow. Yeah, look, this is ×3 because it just takes up so much more room now. I might just use ×2 and leave it like that. And yeah, so as you play with these parameters, as you animate things around, this is how you go and create these effects. And now comes kind of the fun part. How do we export that out so we can bring it into Daz Studio? Kind of interesting. Let me go and say something like frame 80. Like right here. Maybe this is the kind of shape that we want to export. Or maybe something before that. Let's say frame 60. Like this here. That's kind of frame 60. Let's go and export that now. That happens on this other node here under the volume node. So a bit like in R3DS Wrap, you go and save out a file directly from the node. So where it says VDB, left click and drag off this, and then you just select this one here, export VDB. And with this node, you can now go give it a file path, and you have some options here on the bottom, and you also have some control. So we'll look at that in a moment. So right now, I'm just going to go and select this and say my file path. I'll go and put this on my desktop somewhere. Actually, I've got a folder called Volumetric's EmberGen. I'll just put it into the top node here, and I'll call it puff v1. How's that? So in puff, I'm going to give it a file name. I'll just call it puff v1 hyphen and hit save. So that hasn't quite exported the file yet, because I also need to give it the first frame, the number of frames, and the frame stride. So this is like every one frame. You could skip frames, like 2 would be every other frame, 3 would be every third frame, and so forth. The first frame is going to be frame 64, and the number of frames is just going to be 1, because I just want to have this one VDB that I'm going to export here. And that's really all I need to do, and hit export now, and then that should be that, you'd think, but that's not quite the case. So you have to also, under controls, you have to enable what properties your VDB is supposed to contain. And we have some other options here, like the coordinate system. It's by default, it says Z up right-handed, but in Daz Studio we have Y up. So I can change that here and say Y up right-handed. I'm not entirely sure what the difference between left-handed and right-handed is, but right-handed seems to work fine. If I didn't do that, I'd have to go and turn my VDB volume inside Daz Studio around by -90, and I might as well use Y up. But if you're using any of the default VDBs that you get from their website here, under here downloads free VDB examples, they're all exported with Z up right-handed. So you're going to have to go and turn this by -90 degrees so that this doesn't lie flat on the side here in Daz Studio. The more important bit here is that currently we're exporting the density, but nothing else. So I don't know exactly which thing Daz Studio is looking at, but I'm going to go and tick all of these things. If you don't, then nothing might show up in Daz Studio. I had that before as well. I don't know which exact one, if it's fuel or flames or velocity or temperature is the thing that actually makes the fog show up in Daz Studio, but the defaults aren't showing up anything. So just thought I'd let you know. Compression is just something that keeps your file smaller, and that is that. Under export, I can now go and export now. Ding, we've done it. There we go. That is it exported. Exactly, Matt. Absolutely. Okay, let's go back into the Daz Studio and see if we can make this thing show up. That'd be preferable, wouldn't it? Let me go and create myself a new primitive here. I'll make it a cube, but it could also be anything I like. I'm going to go over with the geometry editor and immediately go and rename my surface of the cube from default into volume, just so that in case my volume is larger than my cube, then there's no issues here. I'll switch back to the Universal Manipulator, head over to the Surfaces tab. With my volume surface selected, I'll head over to Presets, Shaders, Iray Effect, double click on Open VDB MDL Volume. Everything turns a little bit transparent. And under Volume File, on my desktop, under Volumetrics, there's Puff V1, and that is that file that we've just made in EmberGen. So let's bring that in. Nothing happens. Let's go and switch this over to Iray and see if something did happen. Oh yeah, don't see anything. That's because the density multiplier is still a bit low. Let's set it to 100 and see. Yes, look at that. Little cloud is there. And it fits right into our bounding box, so I don't need to... Actually, is it a bit cut off at the top? I can't tell. I'm going to go and switch this off. Clip to geometry, just in case. There we go. Little cloud. Homemade VDB, self-made VDB in EmberGen and rendered in Daz Studio. Isn't that nice? To find the last file used. Oh, that's also a clever idea. Thank you. Thank you for the tip. I like it. So if this isn't high res enough, I can go ahead and fiddle with the parameters in EmberGen and make it higher res. So we can do that. That's like where I've shown you this under the simulation tab, under the simulation size. I could just increase the voxel count here. So that is possible. There's also voxel size. You can do that, and you can do all kinds of things to make that look just higher res. But I don't think my cloud actually has that much high resonance in it. So I think we're probably okay here with this. Yeah, but there we go. Success. Made my own VDB, and it's available from all sides. Kind of cute, isn't it? And you can see how you can make your own clouds with that. And, don't be afraid to then put it up on the Daz Store and sell it. Because I think right now we're in need of good volumetric products for all kinds of needs. You could go ahead and create a large ground fog carpet type thing, for example. That's a possibility. You can even go and try to tile that. That would be a good product to have, something like that. I'll leave it up to you. Happy little clouds. That's right. Yes. Happy little clouds. So then the next big puzzle, and we can play with EmberGen literally for ages and ages. There's just so many cool things that you can do with it. One thing I do recommend, I'm going to go and maybe save my project here. Should we call it Puff V1? There we go. Let's call that Puff V1. That saves my project here. The coolest thing to have a look at how did they do certain things is literally to have a look at some of the sample projects. So file, open project, comes with a ton of stuff here. Tornado.ember, those are the files, and this is a cool tornado that you can have a look at. Check it out. If you wanted to view this in full screen, you can do that. And just go, be amazed how this thing just goes and turns. So have a look through the sample projects. It's worth downloading the trial version and play around with it for 2 weeks. It isn't actually as intimidating as I first thought it was. Just for the effects that are just in here, that's just fantastic. Fake smoke, water, great. Let's have a look at that. Whoa, okay. And remember, hit R if you wanted to see this again simulated from the beginning. All right. Very cool. I could just watch this for hours, It is, right? Patrick, I can imagine. It is so easy to get super addicted to it. And neither Patrick nor I am paid to say this. I did actually get in touch with Django, with the main man here, Nick Sievert, and asked, is there a chance that we can get a promo code or something that in case any of you want to buy it, do we get something like 20% off? But I guess he didn't get my message, or he's so busy that he gets too many. So yes, I didn't get one, I'm afraid. But my God. And then the cool thing about having these type of sample projects is that you can investigate, well, how did you do this? What did you do to make that happen? and just dig in and see what you can do there. Fire tornadoes. Any of the other ones, Patrick, that you think look really cool? Jellyfish smoke. Magic darts. Okay, let's have a look at that. Whoa. Okay. That's the magic darts. Also not bad. Very cool. So just to tell you a bit of the vision that the EmberGen people have. So they have this really good rendering that shows you the effects right there. And yes, it can export VDBs, but the rendering inside EmberGen is fascinating. So what they would like you to do ideally is that you use their rendering with your rendering. So they don't necessarily say, hey, try to export this as VDBs and get it out of there. I mean, it can do that, but their main thing is really animate your scene, export your camera as FBX, import it into here, then do your visual effects inside EmberGen and render that pass out with your camera, then render your other animation out from wherever you're doing it, and then composite these two things together. So use this as a fully fledged visual effects suite, and then just composite this together with your either real life action footage or your 3D rendered footage, and you know, you do it that way. And the other big segment that they see is making effects like that and then transporting them into Unity and Unreal Engine. So there's plugins for that available as well. So just very, very cool. As these people have vision, man, and they're at the very beginning of where EmberGen actually is. Hey, don't say if that's cool. Magic Flame Monster, Massive Explosion GPU Heavy. Okay, great. I'm down with that. The damn bro. Niagara Falls. I'll have a look. 60 Poison Smoke. Okay, I'll have a look at that. And not responding, I suppose. Have I overdone it here? Have I broken EmberGen already? Dang. Do you know, so much so that my mouse isn't even reacting anymore. That's a serious problem that I've done here. Either it's still working on it, or it's literally my whole computer's hung itself. I'm so sorry about this. A task manager is still responsive. That's a good sign. Daz Studio is still here. EmberGen is not responding. I suppose it just quit on us. That's okay. Maybe I should switch Iray off. That's probably a good start, huh? Let's switch Iray off while we play with EmberGen. Also, this we can probably do that later. Let's try it again. EmberGen. At least I didn't have to save. Very good point, yes. I'm very bad at saving. Load recovery file here, isn't that nice? I'm saying no because I'm okay with that. I was just doodling around. Yes, but every time you open it up, it comes up with the default project here. And then you can start from there. 60 Poison Smoke. Let's see if my GPU... Ooh, okay. See if my computer likes it. Ooh, look at that. It's mesmerizing. I can see why you're fascinated by that. This is a whole channel, isn't it? Just put that out 24/7, like zzz, like Hypnotoad, isn't it? So R restarts it from scratch here. Space makes it stop, makes it pause. Yes, fascinating stuff, fascinating stuff. Exploring weird software with Jay and Patrick. Oh my. Fire Tornado. Let's have a look at one more. Magic Emerald Ball, Magic Emerald Field, Magic Energy Ball. Ooh, yes, I see. That is pure magic, that. That is a lot of magicness going on here. Yes, I have a feeling that the emitter itself, I guess, is moving on the inside and does something like that. So that's when you animate these things, you can do keyframe animation, but you can also do parameter animation. So you can plug something into the thing that you'd like to animate. So rather than having a keyframe change from here to there, like you would do maybe with a flying meteor, you would put like a randomizing effect in there that would change its value all the time. And this is how you'd receive like an ongoing, thing. I mean, it looks like a planet, doesn't it? Energy ball. Very cool. So we can use this as an animation, or we use a puff of cloud that we've made ourselves. That'd be cool. Or we just make another one from scratch. That is also possible. I can't stop looking at these. They're just so cool. Oh yeah, they have MIDI inputs now as well. So if you're a musician and you want your visual effects to follow the music you're playing, that is also possible. So like, unbelievable. Particle bubbly. Smoke suction. Oh yes. Oh, maybe we should do this. Oops. I've expanded the timeline. I didn't mean to do that. I meant to expand this here. Maybe this is a good thing to bring into Daz Studio. That might be nice. Musical lava lamps, absolutely, with live playing. Isn't that cool? So maybe we'll use this as a nice little example here. I'll see if I can make it so that it doesn't go on forever. Let's see if we can turn this into shorter bursts here. That would be nice. Let me go and just grab these nodes out here. And then I'll just go separate these out just so that we don't get too confused, because it's already confusing enough. I'll just move these out. This is just our VDB export node here. And we'll just go and focus on the first few here. Force line colliders, how exciting. So on here, like on emitter, I'm going to do and say the time between bursts. I'll put this to 5 seconds. So now we have something that's literally, whoops, that's literally just doing that. I think that might be kind of cool. So maybe 5 seconds is a bit much. So 2 is probably enough. So it does this. That's a nice little animation. I could watch this for hours. That's nice. Yeah, let's do that. So let's say we wanted to export this and then animate this and render this in Daz Studio. That'd be kind of cool. So let's go and hit reset and just have a look at how long this is, just so that we know how many. Yes, you are. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yoshi, you can do that. You can sell your creations. That's kind of governed by the license here. So depending on how much money you make, that's the amount of money that you need to give them. So if you go and look at the view pricing, if you make under $1 million a year, then you can buy either of these and then use your projects commercially. If your studio makes $1 million to $100 million a year, then you need to buy the next higher version so that they get a bigger cut. And then enterprise, contact them. But that's essentially how it works, yes. So let's see the amount of frames here. R and play, I say maybe 120. That's probably exactly what we need here. 120 frames from here to there. And then we have a nice little loop that we can make there. Let's do that. 120 frames. And we'll leave everything exactly as it is. Under VDB, we'll just go and grab this out. Left click and drag. Export VDB. And we'll call this, what was it again? Smoke suction. Suction, that's a good name. Let's call it suction. So I'll go and make a new folder in here. And I'll call it suction. Suction, that is how you spell suction, isn't it? Suction, and then I'll say suction v1 hyphen, just so that I have a 4-digit number here at the end. EmberGen these days pads things correctly. So if you have 120 frames, the first one will be your file name with the number 001 at the end. The next one 002, or actually 0001, and so forth. So all have the same length and they're properly padded. That can't be said for the samples that you download from here, if you see these, they're not padded properly. So as a result, the next product that I'm going to show you inside Daz Studio has a bit of an issue with that. So we'll talk about that at the end. So, but VDB, and we have that, and we want the first frame to be 0, number of frames is 120, and we want to export every frame. And that's that. Export now. So this could take a little bit of time, depending on how high res your VDBs are. But 30 seconds, we're probably okay here. We're probably okay. Do you know? Yes, I think so. Yes, I think so. So that you can say your scene is something in which you had a kitchen and the hob is burning, but above the kitchen is something like, like geometry. I think you can use this to just make a cube above the fire, and then the smoke wouldn't go straight up. It would just kind of go, around this. That's something else we need to play with, Patrick. Miss Camilla is here. Mr. Russell is here. I personally haven't, Russell, because I haven't worked out how to make VDBs in Blender yet. I've tried it once and I was thinking, at the 500th mouse click, I was thinking, I'm sorry, I've lost it. So, but it is on my list of things to do. Have you had any luck with that? There, I think that's all of them exported. And let's just pick a random one and just see if it's actually there. So this is my previous scene with the puff cloud here. And no, hang on, that's the suction in here. So I'll just pick one, not so much one of the first ones because they're very small. I'll pick one kind of in the middle. Like any of them here, like this one here, 65, like that. Let's have a look. Ah, do you know what? I've forgotten to change it around. So this is what happens when you don't change the up axis properly. It's kind of nice that this happened. I do like it. It's visible already. That's all good. I like it. But why don't we just go and export it again? I'm thinking. I mean, I could just go into the parameters here, and on X rotate I can say -90, and then that will work. So that's one cheap way around it. But I'm thinking, since we have EmberGen at our disposal, let's go and just export these again. I'm thinking, I just don't want Daz Studio to get confused here. So I'll set this to none so that there's no lock on the file. When I say Daz Studio, I meant Windows, because Windows doesn't really have that concept of, somebody's using that file, I can still overwrite it. No, it's all massive issues and stuff. So anyway, that's here, Z up right-handedness. So I'll go and change that to Y up right-handedness. And that is that. Head over to export and go export now. And now it takes 15 minutes. How exciting. Stargate when it was vertical. Yes, absolutely. That's an interesting concept, isn't it? Just changing the handedness means it takes like 5 minutes longer. Curious. Vorticity. That is a parameter that you can set, the vorticity. I don't quite know what it means, but it's apparently, cool and whatnot. Let's see. So if I go back now and under volumetrics, no, not EmberGen, suction. No, there it is. Suction. Let's go put this in here, 51. As an example, see if that works. Does it? Yes, look at that. Handedness has been corrected. And there was much rejoicing. Okay, great. Let's see if and how we can make this thing animate inside Daz Studio. So that's another puzzle that I didn't know literally until this week, where a viewer brought a really cool product to my attention inside Daz Studio. So the issue is that if we had a timeline here, on each of these frames, we'd have to swap out this VDB file. So frame 0 would have to have file number 0, and then frame 1 would have to be file 1, frame 2 would have to be file 2, and so forth. And currently there's no native mechanism to make this happen in Daz Studio. Thankfully, Thankfully, though, there's a product that can make that happen by the marvelous Alvin Bemar. Let me just show you what that is. And it is called Abbas, Alvin Bemar's animated shader system. And Brian's going to, yes, post that link in the chat. Here it is, Abbas. And you should definitely buy it if you are thinking of animating any kind of shader properties inside Daz Studio. So this magic thing does make it work. And so I think it's been expanded to just make shaders animatable, to also make VDB files animatable. So it can do this. It can swap out image textures as well as VDB files on a per frame basis. And it's really easy to use. And that was one of the things I was wondering is, how did you do it, Alvin? How did you do it? And it's actually super, super clever. So let me show you how this is done. So first of all, we need to expand our timeline to contain the same amount of files, or the same amount of frames that we had in our EmberGen VDB, which I've already forgotten. It's 120. Good stuff. So let's make that happen. So on the bottom here, these are the total frames. So I'll say 120. And then Daz Studio says, okay, the range is frame 0 to frame 119. That's 120 frames in total. So that's cool. We do that. Timeline gets a little bit expanded here. Another thing that I need to expand here, just for my own benefit, on the types down here, I need to enable other. So T, R, and S, this is for translation, rotation, and scale. Scale I don't really need. I don't think I need rotation or translation, to be perfectly honest. All I need is other, but by default that's not enabled. So you need to enable that just so that you can see your keyframes here in a moment. Next, you need Abbas install. So it's a product that is an actual plugin, so it does have a serial number. If you have just bought it and installed it, it's not going to show up until you go into your Daz backend, into your serial number section, and grab out that serial number. And then you can head over to Help, About Install Plugins, and then you'll see a list of things that is installed for you, and it'll show you that Abbas is installed, but you need to type in your serial number or paste your serial number in, restart Daz Studio, and then the plugin is active. So with that enabled, you also get a new tab inside Daz Studio, and that is under Window, Panes, Abbas. There it is. And that's a new dockable tab. It's very, very simple here. I'm going to go and just dock it on my right-hand side here. Like here, so that is just docked over here. It only has 3 options here. One is create an animated shader, and the other 2 we don't really need when we're clever about it. So we only really need this one option here. And we need to click that with our volumetric cube in place. So with that here, on Abbas, I'm going to go and create an animated shader. Hit select. Up comes a dialog box. You can rename your animated shader. I'm going to leave it as it is. Hit accept. And then we don't really need this tab anymore. Back in our scene tab, we have something else now, which is now a node called the animated shader. And because I had my cube selected, it knows that that's the object I'd like to animate. If I didn't have that, I could use one of the other options here to tell it which thing it is that I want to animate. So the clever bit is that if I now select my animated shader, anything that my original object here had on the Surfaces tab is now available on here on the animated shader thing in the Parameters tab. So quite interesting. On the cube, just so that we're all on the same page here, I have something called volume. That's my surface. In there I have my volume channel, which already has my suction first VDB thing in there. If I now go to the animated shader node and head over to Parameters and expand that under Abbas, I have my volume surface, and on there I have my volume channel, which now has all the properties that my original object had. But because this is now showing under the Parameters tab, I can now go and set keyframes for any of these things. Is that amazing or what? So that is how he's done it. So very, very cool. It is your holy grail, Patrick. You're going to have so much fun with it. So it's incredibly clever the way he's designed it. So now we have full control over anything that shows up here. Because it's a parameter, the timeline will understand it. So that's very cool. So if we go to the very top here under Abbas, then these two options at the top here, they're important. First of all, I need to enable it because I need to, I'm basically telling this thing, hey, I want to enable the animation on this thing, so enable it. Record means we're not going to worry about that. Enable files animation, that's the next thing I need to enable. And for that to work, it works a little bit like in Blender. If you enable that, you have a new slider here, which is the completion slider. So on frame 0, this needs to be set to 0%. And on your last frame, this needs to be set to 100%. And because of the way Daz Studio handles automatic keyframes, just go and wiggle this slider just up and down a bit so that that sets a keyframe on frame 0 here. Then I go and left click and drag my playhead all the way to the last frame. And then I'm going to go and crank this all the way up to 100%. This is already so magic. This is the one thing we never had in Daz Studio, and I find that just so cool that Alvin's been able to make that happen. So now if I go and move my playhead, you can see that the completion slider moves between these two keyframes from 0 to 100. And because I've used the exact number of frames that I had in my EmberGen animation, I can park this at, I don't know, frame, what is this, 45? And if I look closely on my volume channel here, I can see it's loading in VDB number 45 now. If I go and park my playhead somewhere else, it's loading in 24 on frame 24, and you know, whatever it is, 77 on frame 77. And that is how it works. And this is just so cool. You know, Alvin, you have deserved that purchase very, very much. And it's just such a cool way to kind of expand the capabilities of Daz Studio in the confines of what it gives us. I was wondering, how can you make that shader tab animatable? And he's just gone ahead and done that. That's very, very clever. You can use this for other things as well. You can use this for textures. You can crank up. You can, I mean, imagine on a regular object, enabling metallicity over time. So turning an object more metal as time progresses, or less metal, make it more shiny, less shiny. All these things are now possible. So I'm having lots of fun already. Let's see what the framing looks like here. If I just park my playhead in the middle and just switch this over to Iray, just so that we have a framing kind of nicely lined up here. This is not a camera, so I can go and just look at it that way. I'm going to turn it into a camera in a moment. And what do you say? Shall we do this kind of framed up from here? Or do we want to do something more from the side here? And should this be on the bottom in the frame? So if I'm going to do like a square version, I'm thinking maybe I'll do, or should we do it from the top here? That's also going to look nice. If we just frame it up like that. That would be kind of funky to see this rendered out. Or should we do multiple and then decide what it looks like later? Maybe we'll do multiple. So we have one from the top and one from the side. What do you think? Yes, absolutely, Camilla. Yes, they are totally available to rewatch later, including the past ones. There are already 3, I think, up there on the forum thread. And we're going to get a proper watch page at one point, for sure. Let me go and create a new camera here and call it, just from here, like call it top view. And they're really quick to render out, so we can go render multiple. And let me see, let's have another one from the kind of from the side here, because that also looks kind of nice. When you create your cameras, I recommend you go back to frame 0, just because it's one of those things. And this is kind of the side view. And let's go and render these things out. I'm going to go switch this over to filament so that we have, that my computer has the kind of, you know, what's it called? All the capabilities he wants for rendering. On my render settings tab, I'll go and not draw the dome, because I'd like for that to be transparent so that we can overlay that with something black maybe. And general, I'm going to go and make it 1200 by, maybe 1200 by 1200 is okay. And I'll go and make this an image series. So we're going to go and compile that in Premiere later. I'll want frame 0 to 119. That's cool. In animations VDBs, this one's going to be called suction. In suction, I'm going to make myself another folder just for this camera angle, and I will call that side view. And there it is. And then I'll give this a name. So under image series, I'll say side view. I just hyphen. That'll be fine. And then under progressive rendering, I think 1000 is probably overkill. 100 is probably adequate, and it's going to be really fast. Let's go 100. Under filtering, I'm going to go and enable the denoiser. I'm going to make it available and enable it. And I think that's all I'm going to do. I set side view, so let's switch the camera into side view and go save my scene. Demo project's probably fine. I'll call this one suction VDB. Alrighty, perfect. And Command R, or Control R rather. There we go. Let's have a coffee while this renders for 120 frames. Yes, Matt, absolutely. I'm trying to do that. I don't know what the best way to do that is. Probably reach out to Richard. That's probably a good idea. I might do that. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for the tip. Yes, that needs to be pinned to the top because I want people to easily find it, including advance notice. So I know that some of us haven't been getting the emails for these streams. So it's one of those things. If I understand it correctly, Daz are transitioning to a new mass emailing system, and currently sometimes the old system just it just doesn't handle the amount of traffic. So one of those things. Yes, you see, I'm learning X201. I'm learning, so there we go. Did we save our EmberGen project? I think we did. I can't remember. I think we did. So let Daz Studio render this one angle while I prepare Premiere Pro for this and show you how I made some of the other animations. Do you know what? Also, I think it might be beneficial if I go and close EmberGen down. I think I'm currently not rendering it, so I'm pausing the animation here. But I think if I just go and save this out, just I think this is very GPU heavy. Smoke suction. I'm just going to call this one suction because we've made some changes here. Suction. There we go. Close EmberGen down. Give Daz Studio more power. Anything else open? No. Good stuff. There, frame 28. Okay, well, fine. So I've got one already that's called VDB Animations. That's that project that I've used for my other little things that I've made there. And one's called Puff, one's called Meteor, one's called Gasoline. And does Gasoline work? Hello? No, Gasoline does not work. Does Meteor still work? Yes, Meteor still works. That's what Yoshi refers to as the Alka-Seltzer one. So very nice. It's kind of cool to see this not as a GIF but as a video. There's the frame rate is a bit more fluid. Yeah, but it is all really just that. Import it into your favorite video editor and let it rip as an image sequence. And then Premiere will export all these bits and pieces. Photoshop can also do it. There's other programs that can do it. But yeah, it's kind of fascinating, isn't it? That you can do that. Add a save and render button. Now that would be cool. Command R, Control R would literally just go and save your scene before you render. Now that would be cool. Very funny. While Daz Studio is rendering, let me just go and have a look if there are any audience questions that I may have overlooked. Can you mix both fogs like I've said in the beginning? Technically you can, but I think if you mix the matte fog and the ground fog, you may run into this issue that you see where one volume starts and where one ends. I think it'll depend on the scene. So have a look at that, Matt. Good question though. Rules are gray or gray. Well, that is I don't know that, to be honest. It's thickness gradation. I think gradation we've already talked about. And Daz is not going to render that glowing bit at the moment. So I have you know, if only I knew how a Blender works properly. I did manage to get it working at one point, to import a VDB into Blender. I'm going to use 3.0 because that's the version that I made it work with. But just to show you the options that we currently don't have and the ones that we probably do want, if I go and just remove that cube here, Shift A to bring in a new volume, so import OpenVDB. That is how it would work in Blender. You do that and then you go and navigate to your favorite VDB. So like, for example, one that we know contains fire. So like we had not smoke, it was not particles, gasoline explosion. Let's do that. Gasoline explosion, somewhere in the middle here, like, you know, 72. That should have these bits. There it is. So it gives you a visible outline of this already. And I don't know how to set up the shader. Sadly, in Blender, it's one of those things I just don't know. But if you were clever enough to do that, on your object here, you would say, on your materials, you would say new. And then under surfaces, you would go to volume down here. And this is the principled volume shader. And in it, you have these values here: color, density, anisotropy, emission strength, black body intensity, temperature. And in EmberGen, you can set these properties on export when you export that VDB. So you can assign these certain color values and certain values in, at least in Blender, and therefore recreate kind of the quality of the VDB when you bring it into Blender. And Blender would then go ahead and render this. I've managed to do it once, but since then I've sadly totally forgotten about it. So it's one of those things. If you can work out how to make it work, you can make these glowy bits show up. So if I go and do this in Blender now and nothing shows up, and I don't really know why or how I made that work last time. So yeah, if you were to be able to do that, then you would see that these orangey bits would show up. But alas, I do not know how to do it. So, but yes, if we had access to these types of properties inside Daz Studio, we could also handle that. Fact. We're nearly there. We're nearly there. Smoke colliding with an object, yes, that is possible, although I haven't actually tried that out. X201, can you add deflection? I believe Patrick was already answering that one as well. Save the last render button. Good point, Camilla. I believe that is indeed there. But that's actually not save the last render, it's save the last draw. So it's not necessarily saving whatever was produced with Control R. It might also be whatever was in the viewport at that point. Yes, that is possible to do that. Like here under File, Save Last Draw. So that is what you mean. It's not necessarily the last render. There is, I think, a temp directory that you could go into that gets cleared out every time you shut down Daz Studio. So if you make a render and then not save it, I think that's where the render lurks around until you then close Daz Studio down. But, you know, don't quote me on that. Before we head over here, let me go to the top view. Go back to my render settings, general, and then up here, I'm going to go and pick a new directory, not side view. I'm going to call this one top view. I'll rename that top view as well and go say render that. Right? Yes. We let it render the next pass while we head over to the Premiere, and I'll say this one is just a puff thing, so I'll put that into its own little folder. Here's puff. And now I'll go and import suction side view. Here it is. This is going to be great. In Premiere, if you select the first image and then just go tick this box here, image sequence, then it'll open up. In Photoshop, you have a very similar way to do this. You open up the first image and you just tick image sequence, and then Photoshop will see it as an animation. That's kind of nice. I'll go and make a new sequence from this clip just so that I can add a bit of pizzazz to it. So this is a bit fast, I think. It works though, and it works beautifully. So maybe this is actually what we need. I don't know. I'm thinking perhaps we should slow it down a little bit. That just looks so cool, doesn't it? Maybe the length is actually okay. I was going to say maybe make it a bit slower. So my Premiere is set up that it assumes a frame count of 60 frames. This would now be 30 frames. That is also nice. Which one do you prefer, the faster one or the slower one? Ha! Ooh, ah! Oh, you do you? Interesting. Camilla, that is interesting. Is that an option that we have maybe in a new version? Is that possible? Is that something that maybe in the beta on the publishing build? I saw there was a new update out today. I might call this one side view 50%, and then I'll make another one that's called side view 100%. Like just duplicate that, and then we can decide which one we'd like to use, faster versus slower. You let me know. Here's slow first, followed by fast. Oh, you're still on 4.16. Camilla, very mysterious. Could it be? I like them both. I can't decide. Could it be a plugin that you have enabled? Slow versus fast. Right. X201. The special Camilla is awesome version. That's the one. Can it start slow and then accelerate as it sucks? Yes, that's possible. That's possible. That's kind of a post-production trick. Oh, let me go over to editing for that and show you how I would do that. So I would go stay with this in the middle, kind of, you know, when it's here. Maybe this is the point at which it starts speeding up. So I just go and cut the clip here, and then here I would go and say this duration could then be. We can either make it gradually go fast, like so, and then here it could literally be 100%, like so. So that's what that would look like. Slow, and then it goes fast. Could do that. I don't mind. I like him. I like them all. I'm thinking maybe the back bit could just be 100% right from the get-go. We probably don't need 2 stages here. So I'll just go and drag this out to the end. And then this one here is then 100% immediately. Starts slow and then it goes. That's possible. Is it? It does, doesn't it? Could it be because I'm in kind of animation mode, something like that? I will investigate this. And it's definitely in the file menu, is it? Interesting. It does, doesn't it? So I think now we have literally 3 variations. Then we have slow first, then fast, and then I can make one. I'll call this one mix maybe, and then I'll go and call the next one. I'll just make one with 100% and one with 50%, and then maybe I'll just upload them all, and then you can pick your favorite. So sequence from clip. Hello, I say sequence from clip. I say like so, and this one I'll say side view 100%, or side view fast and slow. I'll call it. this, and then we'll go and duplicate that and call this one side view slow. Then we have fast and slow. Fast then is as it is, and slow is then 50%. Alrighty, so side view fast, that's like this, which is neat. That's fast. And then we have side view slow. Also not bad. We can just kind of, you know, meditate while this thing's sucking things in. And then we have the mix, side view mix. That's also not bad. Starts slow and then ends fast. With the right sound effects, it's going to be great. We'll leave some GPU resources for Daz Studio. It is, isn't it? We can't make a choice. Yeah, that is also possible. That is also possible. So we go and say, maybe I'll use the slow one and I'll duplicate that. And I'll call this side view reverse. And with reverse, I'll go and say speed duration, reverse the speed. Yes, that is also possible, Camilla. Look at that. And that looks actually very cool as well. So we already have 4 variations. That's just insane, isn't it? And you can just go and put these things all one after the other. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. That is so cool. I think what I really enjoy is bringing all these tools together and coming up with some really crazy artistic vision. So we're casually using so much knowledge and cutting edge applications. Daz Studio, EmberGen, Premiere, and we're just having lots of fun doing that. I think this is where creative projects really start. And we just bring all this together and looping in and out. Exactly. Yes, let's do that. Let's do that. So like if we go and put this here now, so it goes like back and forth all the time, and maybe back and forth just with this speed. So at first it does this, and then it goes and comes back. Fantastic. And then we just keep watching this forever. Oh my, that is just such a cool idea. And then imagine different colors, and then we put lights in, and it's very spooky, isn't it? And then fires come out, and then water keeps on rushing, and my God. Can't wait to see the top view. That's going to be another one of those Sophie's choices. I'll put this up on my community tab so you can keep watching it forever and ever. 119, come on, Ant. Oh yeah, 119, that was it. 119 is 120, isn't it? So let's go and say import the next one, which was the top view, which is equally intriguing, I'm sure. Top view sequence from clip. These two guys, I think they're going to go and be put into into a bin like so, and we're going to call this one suction. So the top view is that. So top view also looks quite impressive, I gotta say, both in fast and in slow. Probably also in slow and fast and reverse. So let's go and duplicate that and make it 50% first of all. Then we'll go and copy it out again, and then we're going to go and reverse it. So we start outside in, or maybe we should do it the other way around. Let's go and do this is then reverse, and this is then the right way around, so that we have that kind of out, in, then in, out. Then we do that again. And then we're just going to put this guy at the end again. So he needs to be reversed as well. All right. That's nice. Then that is, oh my goodness. Wow. Now making eye texture, exactly. Now we can put two of them next to one another, and then it's like somebody's looking at you. It's looking at me funny. So those are the seriously cool things that we can make with both Daz Studio and EmberGen. My God. Sometimes I'm getting to the stage and I just have to look at these things like forever, because I can't believe we've just made that in literally under 2 hours. Let's have a look at this other thing one more time, or actually just build it out much like this. Yeah, so just go and duplicate these out here like so. And then we're going to make this one here 100 again. And we're going to make this one here 50 again. Does this work? So in to out, out to in to out, out to in. Perfect. These are the masterpieces we've made today from scratch. I gotta say, I don't really know if the faster version or the slower version works for me. I think they're both really cool. I really can't decide. Like the out in as a fast thing, as one thing together. I think I like that. Like here, this, like from here to there. I think I like that. This one excerpt, I really like that. So that's definitely going to be one GIF I'm going to make. And then there's the top view, of course. The top view also I can't really get enough of. And once again, maybe here the whole sequence is kind of nice. I'll see how much I can fit in to a GIF. See anemone breathing, exactly. And I'll get that thread pinned. My friends, I think that was it. Unless you have any other burning questions, I'm going to go and say good night and goodbye. Did this all make sense? Any questions about the VDB shader? Any questions about the contest? You should all go enter the contest. I don't know if they accept animations, but this one, that one would totally snack up the Cintiq. I'm sure it would. I'm sure it would. Check out a free 14-day trial version of EmberGen. It is really, really cool. It's less intimidating than it looks. There are not a lot of tutorials out there on this right now, but they're coming. So they've just started written documentation. The owner, Nick, he does a lot of streams, so they're not short form tutorials of how to use the software, but his streams are quite nice, and he jumps a little bit all over the place, but it's you'll pick it up. If you do have a bit of headspace to take this in, this is something that you can make amazing things with. So I recommend you have a look at this and see where this is all going. Use the force, exactly. My friends, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in about 2 weeks, if you're up for it, on a new Daz public stream. We haven't decided on a topic yet. I'm thinking there might be a guest involved, but let's see. I'm also thinking something along lights, so, you know, one of those things. My friends, thank you so much for dropping by. It was a wonderful session. Have a wonderful night or a wonderful day for the friends in Australia. Thank you so much. I will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.